This is ENCA. I'm Dan Moyane. It's coming up to 11:15. Now, it's been 10 days of protests in the United States over the death of 46-year-old George Floyd. We caught up with Brooklyn resident and Working Families Party spokesperson Nalini Stamp. She says the outrage has united Americans across races.
People are enraged, people are in anger, and also I've never seen in my lifetime a multiracial group of people who are standing with each other. Yesterday we had actions in all 50 states and Puerto Rico, which is a colony of the United States, and it was such a beautiful showing. People are standing up together, but also we know what's going on as well. Trump has wants the military to come in, just like he's pulled the military into D.C. and to increase militarization of our communities. We have people continuing to die. We had somebody in New York die from pepper spray in a detention center for being pepper sprayed too much. People are saying enough is enough. From years ago, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, like this, our backs are against the wall and people are uprising in the United States right now.
Seems like we're witnessing human solidarity in action. Now, let's continue our discussion this morning on ENCA with Judge Navi Pillay, former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Khadija Bawa, researcher for the Social Justice Coalition, and of course, for this last part of our discussion at this hour, we're getting the views as well. A personal account from a South African, Abang Mukhase, who now lives in Baltimore in the U.S. Welcome, Abang. I know you've had the opportunity to listen to our earlier discussion that also included well-known New York-based Reverend, who's also a human rights, civil rights activist, Reverend Dylan. Let me start with you at this hour, Abang, for having been so patient with us, listening to what you've had to hear, and also understanding now that people are calling for change in the American justice system. You, as a father of three, and two of your children are boys, when you look at all of this, do you get a sense of hope and optimism that your boys will be safe into the future in America?
It's a sad reality what's going on. And as a South African, a song rises in me as I remember what used to happen or what's still happening in South Africa. And the song is Senzeni Na. And it's the question that just keeps coming up to me later on today, this Friday afternoon. I'll actually be taking my kids and we'll be protesting here in Maryland. And that's the song that keeps coming up, that what have we done as a black nation? What have we done as black people? So yes, black lives do matter. And when we say that, we don't mean white lives or other lives don't matter. But definitely, as everybody can see, it seems like our lives don't matter. It's saddening. I'm started having a talk with my two boys. My youngest is 7 years old, and my middle one is 10 years old. And as we get ready to march later on this afternoon, I'm having these talks with them. And it's a tough one because you don't want them growing up hating white people. You don't want them growing up scared of white people. But you have to make them realize that as a black boy in America, you are being seen as a threat. Holding candy in your hand can be mistaken for holding a gun, and you could be killed for that. So teaching them what to do or what not to do when confronted with police officers, it's a hard conversation. It's like, the way I was thinking about it is like having a sex talk with your kids. You don't know how to really address it. But unfortunately, it's the reality of being black in America at the current moment.
Are you at some level a little bit heartened by the fact that we're seeing young people in America from all walks of life, black, white, Latino, and all other hues, taking to the streets and joining the Black Lives Matter movement?
To me, it actually stirred hope as I look at that, because I think for the first time, everybody or most people are getting involved than before. I've seen people even approaching me here in the U.S., white Americans for that matter, wanting to find out how they can get involved. And I think one of the things that a lot of white people don't know how to react in this, because they don't want to be offensive. I think, for the most part, and I think it's the white privilege that has blinded most of them to what's going on. But to see this process, to see what's going on around the world, I mean, in Germany, Australia, you see all those things, and to me, it's giving me hope, and I'm hoping this will stir up conversations, and I think we can definitely change the world one conversation at a time, and I think this is time to ride this wave and see how far we can go, because it's a little bit different. Yes, it happens a lot here in Baltimore. We've had Freddie Gray, which looked like a war zone when that happened. We had Ahmed Abri not too long ago, so it happened so much. But I think what's different about this is that everybody's getting involved. Well, most people are, black, white, from different walks of life. And to me, that gives me hope. And I'm hopeful that this will bring some difference in what's going on.
Yeah, I've seen commentary as well out of the United States that some people are saying to remain silent at this time anywhere in the world is also a form of violence. So people need to speak up. Now, how easy might it be to change the system? Khadija, I'm going to bring you here because so far we are hearing that we have long history of such brutality over centuries against black people. And today the systems of policing, including here in South Africa, are really based on that old mentality of white supremacists, as you point out in your article, in terms of policing of black people, and that hyper-masculinity that we see, or as some people used to call it in this country during apartheid, the skit and donor attitude.
Yes, yes. So I think that, so as I write, is that our crisis in South Africa currently is a crisis of legitimacy on the part of the police, but it is also a crisis of accountability. So previously, the Reverend rightly pointed out that while all attention now is on George Floyd, there are so many black men in America that have been targeted that haven't gotten the level of attention. And in South Africa, that is the same. It cannot be that every time something like as brutal and as violent as the killing of an unarmed man happens, that we must take to the street, because the reality is that there are so many people that are persecuted by local law enforcement, by the South African National Defence Force, and by local SAPs, that what we need is a system of internal accountability. And when we even talk about, the standing of oversight that IPID has, it is not enough. It is not enough for us to want a police service to police the police service. We have to see from the ministers of defense, from the minister of police, and at the metro level, we have to see a willingness for internal accountability. And that is what we're sitting with in South Africa now. That is what activists and community organizers and researchers will be looking towards, right? Is if we are going to see a level of internal accountability from the ministers and everyone else that commands security services.
Now, you've got legitimacy that you are raising there, Khadija, and accountability. Judge Pillay, from a human rights culture, to ensure that we get back to that and we have those systems of internal accountability that can be trusted by the public, what, in your view, should we do in South Africa going forward? What should our leaders, those who are supposed, after all, to protect us as citizens, do?
Well, let me say that the law enforcement in the United States is still white dominated. Here, we've gone through transformation, but obviously attitudes have to change. We're still adopting colonial methods of law enforcement. It should be an emphasis on protection services. They're there to protect the people. Now, the calls in the United States cities are not only for justice and accountability, which are immediate claims. They're asking for, as a minority, for protection because they said they don't have the power to make laws, proper laws. We have the power in our democracy. We have good laws. We have the right to equality. The U.S. Constitution does not have the right to equality. We have the right to dignity. They don't have it. So they envy us. But what are we doing with all these mechanisms? The fault lies in lack of implementation. And like many South Africans, I too am very angry at the levels of corruption, incompetency, and lack of implementation of these good laws. We are the authors, the whole world praises us for that Durban Declaration and Plan of Action. That has to be implemented because it addresses the key cause of violence, which is the economic inequalities and poverty.
Thank you very much.
So there has to be greater implementation. This is what civil society in South Africa demands.
Thank you very much. Judge Navi Pillay, thank you to Coalition of Social Justice researcher Khadija Bawa, and of course to South African who now lives in Baltimore, Abang Mukhase, for your views. This is ANCA.